What if the creatures around us are not just reacting, but thinking, not just surviving, but experiencing? Imagine your dog not only recognizing your voice, but wondering about your absence. Picture an elephant not just following a path, but remembering past journeys and anticipating the future. For centuries, humans have asked the ultimate question: do animals know they exist? Are they aware of themselves in the same way we are, able to reflect, to feel, to know? Or are they locked inside instincts with no true sense of self? This is not just philosophy, it's science. From apes who recognize themselves in mirrors, to dolphins who invent signature whistles like names, to crows planning for tomorrow, evidence is mounting that animals may hold forms of consciousness once thought uniquely human. But consciousness is a slippery concept. Even in ourselves, defining it is one of science's hardest problems. So how can we measure it in creatures whose thoughts are hidden behind fur, feathers, and scales? In this journey, we'll dive into groundbreaking studies, strange experiments, and ethical debates that challenge how we see animals, and perhaps how we see ourselves. Because if animals truly know they exist, then Earth is not only alive with beating hearts, but also with minds aware of their own being. And that changes everything. Before we dive deeper into the mystery of animal minds, here's a quick reminder. If you're fascinated by the hidden worlds of animals and want to uncover more truths about how they think, feel, and live, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. By joining us, you'll be part of a growing community that explores the deepest questions in science and nature. Are we alone in consciousness? Or do animals share in this hidden dimension of awareness? Your support helps us create more long-form, in-depth documentaries that bring you closer to the wonders of the animal kingdom. So tap that button and let's continue this journey together. When we talk about consciousness, we often mean something deeper than just being awake or reacting to the world. A thermostat can react to heat. A computer can calculate complex equations. But consciousness suggests something more, a subjective experience. It's the difference between simply sensing light and actually seeing the sunset and knowing it is you who is watching. Scientists sometimes break this idea into layers. At the most basic level, there is sentience, the ability to feel sensations like pain, hunger, or warmth. Then comes awareness, the recognition of the outside world and one's place in it. But at the highest level, there is self-awareness, the recognition that you are you, separate from everything else, an entity with an inner life. For humans, this self-awareness seems natural, but is it uniquely ours? Could a chimpanzee, a dolphin, or even a crow have a sense of selfhood? When a parrot calls out its name, or when an elephant mourns its dead, are they expressing some spark of consciousness? Defining consciousness is one of the hardest puzzles in science. Philosophers call it the hard problem, because while we can measure brain activity and behavior, we cannot directly measure what it feels like to be another being. Still, through careful experiments and observations, we can begin to peel back the layers, asking, do animals simply react to the world, or do they truly know they exist within it? This is where our journey begins, by trying to define, test, and uncover the hidden signs of awareness across the animal kingdom.
One of the most famous attempts to test animal consciousness is called the mirror self-recognition test. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. You instantly recognize the reflection as yourself, not another human staring back. But what about animals? Do they understand that the creature in the glass is them? In the 1970s, psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. devised a simple experiment. He placed a harmless paint mark on an animal's forehead, somewhere it couldn't see without a mirror. Then, he put the animal in front of a mirror. If the animal tried to touch or investigate the mark on its own body, rather than the reflection, it suggested a form of self-recognition, a key sign of self-awareness. The results were astonishing. Great apes like chimpanzees, bonobos, and orangutans passed the test, often examining themselves curiously, even making funny faces. Dolphins and elephants also showed self-recognition, gently inspecting marks on their bodies using mirrors. Even magpies, small birds, shocked researchers by pecking at marks on their feathers after seeing them in a reflection. But many animals failed the test, not because they lack consciousness, but perhaps because the mirror isn't meaningful to them. Dogs, for example, rely heavily on smell, not sight, to identify themselves. For them, a reflection is just an odd visual, not a self-portrait. This raises a critical point. Are we truly measuring self-awareness, or just whether animals interact with mirrors in ways humans expect? The mirror test is not perfect, but it opened the door to a revolutionary idea. Self-awareness may not be uniquely human. Instead, it may exist in many different forms, expressed in ways shaped by each animal's unique sensory world.
For many years, the mirror test, in which animals are marked with a spot of paint and observed to see if they recognize the mark on themselves, was considered the ultimate measure of self-awareness. Chimps, dolphins, elephants, and magpies passed, suggesting they could recognize themselves. But as time went on, scientists realized this test may be far too limited. After all, not every creature relies on vision the way humans do. Take dogs, for example. They live in a world of scent. When presented with mirrors, they don't respond the way chimps do. But when given a sniff test with samples of their own urine alongside others, they act differently, investigating the unfamiliar scents much more intensely. Could this be the dog's version of a mirror? A test that reflects their reality, not ours? Similarly, researchers have designed experiments with octopuses that test decision-making and problem-solving, or scrub jays who remember where they've hidden food and sometimes re-hide it if they suspect another bird was watching. These behaviors hint at awareness of self and others, even if they don't involve mirrors. This shift reminds us of a crucial lesson. Consciousness might wear many forms. Just because an animal doesn't pass our human design test doesn't mean it lacks self-awareness. Instead, it may mean we haven't yet asked the right question or framed it in a way that matches their world. The mirror test opened the door, but the exploration of animal consciousness is now expanding into many creative, species-specific experiments that reveal a far richer and more nuanced picture. When we think of animal consciousness, elephants are often near the top of the list. They are famous not only for their extraordinary memory, but also for behaviors that suggest a deep sense of self and social awareness. In mirror tests, elephants have shown the ability to recognize their reflections, using their trunks to investigate marks placed on their foreheads. This places them among the rare few species, alongside dolphins, magpies, and great apes, that seem capable of self-recognition. But perhaps even more telling are their emotional behaviors. Elephants have been observed returning to the bones of deceased companions, gently touching skulls and tusks with their trunks in what many scientists describe as mourning rituals. This reverence for the dead suggests a profound awareness that goes beyond simple instinct. Their communication, too, reveals layers of intelligence and awareness. Elephants produce low-frequency rumbles, sometimes traveling for miles, that allow them to coordinate across vast distances. Some calls seem to carry unique identifiers, almost like names, which indicates they may recognize individuals not just visually, but conceptually. When we combine these elements, mirror recognition, ritualistic mourning, complex memory, and identity-based communication, we see a portrait of a creature that not only exists in the present, but also connects the past and future in meaningful ways. Elephants remind us that consciousness may not belong solely to humans. Instead, it may arise wherever complex lives demand an inner world as rich as the outer one. Dolphins are often described as the ocean's intellectuals, and for good reason. Their brains are large relative to body size, second only to humans in terms of the encephalization quotient, a measure of brain-to-body ratio often linked with intelligence. But size alone doesn't explain their remarkable minds. It's what they do with them that matters. Dolphins pass the mirror self-recognition test, showing they can identify their own reflections. This indicates a level of self-awareness rare in the animal kingdom. But their consciousness goes even deeper. Dolphins use signature whistles, unique vocal calls that function almost like personal names. When separated, dolphins call each other by these whistles, demonstrating not just communication, but recognition of individual identity. Playfulness, too, offers a window into their inner world. Dolphins invent games, pass around objects, and even blow bubble rings, seemingly for the joy of it. This ability to engage in activities with no immediate survival purpose suggests a rich, conscious life full of curiosity. And perhaps most fascinating is their empathy. Wild dolphins have been documented helping injured pod members and even assisting humans in danger at sea. Such altruistic behavior hints at an awareness not only of the self, but of others, a sense of social responsibility woven into their consciousness. When we consider all of this self-recognition, unique identifiers, play, and empathy, it becomes clear that dolphins experience their existence in ways strikingly parallel to our own. Their world may be submerged, but their inner minds soar above the waves of instinct into something much closer to awareness. When we talk about animal consciousness, the great apes, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, and gorillas stand at the forefront of the discussion. They're not only our closest living relatives, sharing up to 98 to 99% of our DNA, but also creatures that demonstrate extraordinary signs of self-awareness and inner life. One of the most powerful demonstrations is the mirror test. Chimpanzees and orangutans consistently recognize their reflections, touching marks placed on their faces while looking in a mirror. This indicates a conscious awareness of the self as distinct from others. Gorillas, too, have shown similar responses, though individual differences often emerge. But apes' consciousness is revealed not only in experiments, but in their daily lives. They use tools with remarkable skill. Chimpanzees craft sticks to fish termites for mounds, crack nuts with stone hammers, and even use leaves as sponges to drink water. Orangutans in the wild have been observed making umbrellas out of broad leaves to shield themselves from rain. These acts show foresight, planning, and creativity, hallmarks of a conscious mind. Then there's language and communication. Apes like Koko the gorilla and Kanzi the bonobo have learned to use hundreds of signs or lexicograms to express desires, emotions, and even abstract ideas. Koko famously expressed sadness when her pet kitten died, giving us a glimpse into a world of feelings that closely parallels our own. Social behavior also reveals an emotional depth. Chimps console grieving companions, form alliances, and even display political maneuvering within their groups. These actions require an understanding of not only the self, but also the minds and emotions of others, a capacity known as theory of mind. In apes, we see reflections of ourselves, curiosity, love, grief, cooperation, and even rivalry. Their consciousness reminds us that the line between human and animal is not as sharp as once believed, but rather a continuum of awareness. When we talk about animal consciousness, the great apes, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, and gorillas stand at the forefront of the discussion. They're not only our closest living relatives, sharing up to 98 to 99% of our DNA, but also creatures that demonstrate extraordinary signs of self-awareness and inner life. One of the most powerful demonstrations is the mirror test. Chimpanzees and orangutans consistently recognize their reflections, touching marks placed on their faces while looking in a mirror. This indicates a conscious awareness of the self as distinct from others. Gorillas, too, have shown similar responses, though individual differences often emerge. But apes' consciousness is revealed not only in experiments, but in their daily lives. They use tools with remarkable skill. Chimpanzees craft sticks to fish termites for mounds, crack nuts with stone hammers, and even use leaves as sponges to drink water. Orangutans in the wild have been observed making umbrellas out of broad leaves to shield themselves from rain. These acts show foresight, planning, and creativity, hallmarks of a conscious mind. Then there's language and communication. Apes like Koko the gorilla and Kanzi the bonobo have learned to use hundreds of signs or lexicograms to express desires, emotions, and even abstract ideas. Koko famously expressed sadness when her pet kitten died, giving us a glimpse into a world of feelings that closely parallels our own. Social behavior also reveals an emotional depth. Chimps console grieving companions, form alliances, and even display political maneuvering within their groups. These actions require an understanding of not only the self, but also the minds and emotions of others, a capacity known as theory of mind. In apes, we see reflections of ourselves, curiosity, love, grief, cooperation, and even rivalry. Their consciousness reminds us that the line between human and animal is not as sharp as once believed, but rather a continuum of awareness. Few creatures embody wisdom and awareness quite like the elephant. With their massive brains, 3 times the size of ours in weight, elephants display behaviors that suggest not only intelligence, but also a profound emotional and conscious depth. One of the most striking signs of self-awareness is the mirror test. When elephants are shown a mirror, they don't mistake their reflection for another animal. Instead, they explore their bodies, touching marks placed on their faces, proving they recognize themselves. This awareness of me versus other is one of the clearest markers of consciousness that humans, great apes, and dolphins also share. But elephants reveal their minds in more subtle ways. They have extraordinary memories, remembering locations of water holes and safe migration routes across vast landscapes, even after decades. Such memory is not just survival instinct. It's a conscious awareness of time, place, and experience. Perhaps most moving are their rituals around death. Herds have been observed gathering around the bones of deceased relatives, gently touching them with their trunks, standing quietly as though in mourning. Some even return to the same spot years later, showing a sense of loss and remembrance that is deeply familiar to us. Elephants also show empathy. They comfort distressed herd members, help calves out of mud pits, and even adjust their behavior depending on the emotional state of those around them. This suggests they're not just reacting, they're understanding and responding to the feelings of others. Taken together, these behaviors form a remarkable picture of an animal that doesn't just live, but truly experiences life. Elephants may not speak as we do, but in their memories, their grief, their joy, and their self-recognition, they whisper a truth we cannot ignore. Consciousness is not uniquely human. It is shared. Elephants are among the largest brained animals on Earth, and their behavior continues to amaze scientists studying consciousness. One of the most striking demonstrations of their self-awareness comes from the famous mirror test. In this test, a large mirror is placed in an elephant's enclosure. At first, the elephant inspects it, touching it with its trunk, peering behind it, trying to figure out what it is. Then comes the critical moment. Researchers place a visible mark on the elephant's forehead in a spot it can only see in the mirror. Instead of treating the reflection as another elephant, the elephant uses the mirror to investigate and touch the mark on its own head. This suggests something extraordinary, an understanding that the reflection is not another being, but itself. Why does this matter? The mirror test has long been considered a benchmark for self-recognition, a cornerstone of consciousness. Very few animals have ever passed. Great apes, dolphins, magpies, and elephants. This ability hints at a level of awareness far beyond instinct. It suggests elephants have a sense of identity, of me versus not me. But elephant consciousness goes deeper. Observations in the wild reveal that elephants mourn their dead, comfort one another, and even return to the bones of lost relatives years later. Their recognition of self may tie into this social intelligence, enabling them to understand not just who they are, but also who they've lost. The elephant in the mirror reminds us of something profound. Self-awareness may not be uniquely human. It could be a shared thread connecting us to other sentient beings on this planet. For centuries, humans believed self-awareness was the domain of mammals, creatures with large brains and complex societies. But one bird shattered that assumption: the magpie. Magpies are members of the crow family, highly intelligent birds known for problem-solving and memory. In groundbreaking experiments, scientists subjected magpies to the mirror test. Just like elephants, apes, and dolphins, the magpies approached the mirror curiously, tapping it with their beaks and wings. But the pivotal moment came when researchers placed a colored sticker on the bird's throat, only visible in the mirror. What happened next astonished the scientific world. The magpie looked into the mirror, then reached down with its beak and scratched at the spot on its own body. This was the first time a non-mammal passed the mirror test, proving that self-recognition is not confined to creatures with mammalian brains. The magpie's breakthrough forced scientists to rethink the link between brain structure and consciousness. Unlike mammals, birds have no neocortex. Instead, their intelligence is housed in a differently organized brain, suggesting that nature may evolve self-awareness in multiple ways. The implications are profound. If magpies, small, feathered, with brains the size of a walnut, can recognize themselves, then consciousness may not be a single evolutionary path, but a widespread phenomenon across life. This discovery opened the door to the idea that awareness can emerge in unexpected forms, challenging the human-centered view of intelligence and selfhood. Magpies remind us that self-awareness is not bound by size, shape, or biology. It is a spark of knowing capable of appearing in creatures far beyond what we once imagined. When it comes to self-awareness, two of humanity's closest companions, dogs and cats, often fail the famous mirror test. Place a mirror in front of a dog, and chances are will bark, wag, or look behind the glass for another animal. Cats might swat at the reflection or simply lose interest. Neither seems to recognize the image as their own body. But does that mean they lack self-awareness? Not necessarily. Critics of the mirror test argue that it was designed by humans, for humans, and relies heavily on vision. Dogs, however, are olfactory creatures. Their sense of smell is their primary way of identifying the world and themselves. If you put their scent on an object, many dogs can distinguish between their own smell and another's. In fact, studies using olfactory mirror tests suggest that dogs may have a form of self-recognition based on scent, not sight. Cats, too, may interpret mirrors differently. Solitary by nature, they may not see reflection as socially relevant, and thus the test fails to measure their kind of awareness. These insights remind us that consciousness may not be uniform. Self-awareness could take many forms, shaped by each species' dominant senses and ecological needs. For dogs, self-knowledge might come through smell. For cats, through spatial memory, independence, or subtle social cues invisible to us. The failure of dogs and cats in a human design test may say more about our assumptions than their inner worlds. So while your dog may not know itself in a mirror, it may know its place in a pack, its relationship to you, and its own scent. Your cat may not swipe the sticker from its reflection, but it navigates its world with a quiet intelligence that doesn't require mirrors. In the end, self-awareness may be more diverse than the mirror test suggests. Dogs and cats remind us that the consciousness of animals may be richer, stranger, and far more varied than we've been able to measure. One of the most fascinating clues about animal consciousness comes from a concept we call metacognition, literally thinking about thinking. It's the ability to reflect on one's own knowledge and recognize when you don't know something. For a long time, scientists thought this ability was unique to humans. But experiments with monkeys have challenged that assumption. In one groundbreaking study, rhesus monkeys were trained to take memory tests on a computer screen. They could earn rewards for correct answers. But here's the twist. Before answering, they were given an option to decline the question. If they weren't sure, they could choose not to risk making a mistake. Remarkably, the monkeys often opted out when the task was too difficult, suggesting that they knew what they didn't know. This is more than trial and error. It hints at an internal awareness of uncertainty, something psychologists call metacognitive monitoring. The monkeys weren't just guessing, they were assessing their own mental state. Humans do this all the time, pausing to say, "I'm not sure," or "I'll need to double check." Seeing monkeys show a similar pattern raises profound questions. Are they aware of their own minds? Do they possess a reflective layer of consciousness once thought exclusive to us? Critics caution that these results might be explained by learned behavior, but mounting evidence suggests otherwise. From choosing harder or easier tasks to selectively avoiding questions, monkeys appear to demonstrate genuine metacognition, and that places them much closer to humans in the hierarchy of awareness than we previously believed. If monkeys can evaluate the limits of their own knowledge, then the line between human and non-human consciousness becomes blurrier. It suggests that the roots of self-reflection run deep in our evolutionary tree, stretching far beyond our own species. When we talk about consciousness, we often connect it with complex emotions like regret. Regret requires more than simply experiencing the present. It means looking back on a choice, recognizing it was a mistake, and imagining a better alternative. For centuries, humans assumed this was far beyond the reach of animals. Yet in recent years, rats have surprised us. In a groundbreaking study at the University of Minnesota, researchers built a kind of restaurant row for rats. Each station offered different flavored food, but with varying wait times. The rats had to decide, wait or move on to another restaurant. Sometimes, a rat skipped a short wait for a preferred flavor, only to face a much longer wait at the next stop. What happened then was astonishing. The rats would pause, glance back at the choice they had just made, and behave in a way strikingly similar to human regret. Their brains even showed activity patterns in the orbitofrontal cortex, the same brain region linked to regret in people. This wasn't simple frustration. The rats weren't just reacting to the long wait. They seemed to understand that their previous decision had cost them something better. They were mentally comparing the path they chose with the one they didn't. That's the essence of regret. Not just feeling bad, but recognizing how things could have been better. The implications are profound. If rats, a species we often dismiss as simple, can experience something like regret, then the roots of reflective emotion run deeper than we thought. It suggests that consciousness, even in its subtle forms, may be far more widespread in the animal kingdom than we ever imagined. And it raises a provocative question. If animals can rethink their choices, are they also capable of learning about themselves in ways we've overlooked? When we think of intelligence, we often imagine planning for the future, saving for tomorrow, preparing for what hasn't yet happened. For a long time, scientists believed this was a uniquely human skill. But then came the crows. Crows, members of the corvid family, are astonishing problem solvers. In the wild, they use sticks to extract insects from crevices and even drop nuts onto roads, waiting for cars to crack them open. But the most surprising discovery came when researchers tested whether crows could think ahead, not just act in the moment. In a controlled experiment, scientists gave crows a tool they could use to access food. The catch? The tool wasn't useful right away. Instead, the birds had to store it and use it much later, sometimes hours afterward. Remarkably, the crows not only saved the tool, but used it at the correct time to get their reward. Even more, they sometimes rejected an immediate small treat if it meant securing the tool they would need for a bigger reward later. This is something psychologists call future planning, delaying gratification now to benefit later. It requires more than instinct. It suggests mental time travel. The crows were imagining a scenario that didn't exist yet, holding it in mind and preparing for it. That's a window into consciousness. For humans, the ability to picture tomorrow is tied deeply to self-awareness and our sense of identity over time. Seeing this in crows blurs the line between us and the animal world. These birds, with brains the size of a walnut, are proving that foresight may not be exclusive to primates after all. So next time you see a crow perched on a wire, watching the world with sharp black eyes, consider this. It may already be planning for tomorrow. Among all animals on Earth, few feel as alien and as intelligent as the octopus. With 8 arms lined with sensitive suckers, the ability to change color and texture instantly, and a brain unlike anything in mammals, octopuses have fascinated scientists for centuries. But what truly sets them apart is their remarkable ability to solve problems. In captivity, octopuses have been seen opening jars, dismantling water filters, and even escaping aquariums through tiny gaps no one thought they could fit through. Some individuals learn how to unscrew lids to reach a crab inside, while others rearrange objects in their tanks, seemingly for amusement. These aren't just instinctive actions. They show flexibility, creativity, and memory. One of the most surprising aspects is where their intelligence comes from. Unlike humans, whose neurons are concentrated in the brain, over half of an octopus's neurons are in its arms. This means each arm has a degree of independence, able to sense, react, and even make decisions without waiting for instructions from the central brain. It's as if an octopus has 8 semi-autonomous minds working together. Even more striking, octopuses display individuality. Some are bold and curious, others shy and reclusive. Their problem-solving styles differ, just like personalities in humans. This suggests not just intelligence, but consciousness that is rich and personal. When you look at an octopus, you're staring into the eyes of an animal separated from us by over 500 million years of evolution. Yet somehow, through a completely different biological path, it has arrived at a form of awareness that feels oddly familiar. An alien mind, right here in Earth's oceans.
When we talk about culture, we often think of humans, languages, music, art, and traditions handed down through generations. But whales remind us that culture is not uniquely ours. In the oceans, these giants carry traditions of their own, shaping how they live and interact across vast distances. Humpback whales, for example, sing complex songs that can last for hours. What's fascinating is that these songs change over time, spreading like waves across entire ocean basins. A melody born in the Pacific can eventually travel thousands of miles as different whale populations adopt and adapt it, almost like a musical fashion trend. Orcas, the killer whales, provide another striking example. Different pods have distinct hunting strategies and dialects. Some pods specialize in hunting seals, while others prefer fish, passing these learned techniques down to their young. These aren't instinctive behaviors. They're traditions, shared knowledge within family groups. Even migration patterns show signs of cultural inheritance. Young whales often follow the lead of elders, learning ancient routes across the seas. These journeys are not hardwired into DNA, but passed on through teaching and observation. Whales teach us that culture is not defined by cities, tools, or written records. It is the ability to learn from one another, to pass on wisdom, and to shape the future with the lessons of the past. In the songs of humpbacks and the hunting calls of orcas, we hear echoes of traditions as rich and meaningful as our own.
Among all the animals we share this planet with, elephants are perhaps the clearest mirrors of our own emotions. Their intelligence is legendary, but it is their deep emotional lives that truly set them apart. Few moments capture this better than the way elephants respond to death. When an elephant dies, the herd does not simply move on. They pause, gather around the body, and perform rituals that scientists describe as remarkably similar to mourning. Family members gently touch the bones or tusks of the deceased with their trunks, lingering in silence. Some even carry bones with them for days, as though unwilling to let go. There are heartbreaking stories of mothers staying beside their calves long after they have passed, refusing to eat or leave. Other elephants have been observed returning to the site of a death years later, touching the remains as if remembering. These behaviors suggest more than instinct. They hint at memory, empathy, and a recognition of loss. What makes this even more extraordinary is that elephants don't behave this way toward the bones of other species. Their special treatment of their own kind suggests they understand something about death, that it is permanent and that it matters. In these rituals, we see the outline of consciousness stretching into emotional depth. Elephants remind us that grief is not uniquely human. It is part of the shared story of sentient beings who form bonds that outlive the body. In the silent vigil of an elephant herd, we hear an echo of our own sorrow and perhaps a lesson about compassion that transcends species. For thousands of years, dogs have lived alongside humans, not just as companions, but as emotional partners. More than any other species, they have evolved to read us in ways that go far beyond simple training. Science has shown that dogs can recognize human emotions through subtle cues, a shift in tone of voice, a change in posture, or even the look in our eyes. Studies reveal that dogs not only distinguish between happy and angry expressions, but also adjust their behavior in response. A smiling face may bring a wagging tail, while tears can draw a paw placed gently on a lap. This ability goes beyond recognition. It hints at empathy. In controlled experiments, dogs often approached crying humans, even strangers, offering comfort with nuzzles or quiet presence. It suggests they don't just notice emotions. They respond to them in meaningful ways. Some researchers believe this skill is the product of coevolution. Over millennia of partnership, dogs who were better at understanding humans thrived, leading to a species uniquely attuned to us. But perhaps it's more than survival, it's connection. Anyone who has shared a bond with a dog knows the look of concern in their eyes when you're upset, or the joyful leaps when you're excited. Dogs remind us that consciousness is not only about self-awareness, but about awareness of others. Their empathy demonstrates a mind capable of bridging species lines, of entering into our emotional world. In their wagging tails and quiet comfort, dogs show us a truth. To be conscious is also to care. For centuries, many assumed fish were little more than instinct-driven creatures, reacting automatically to the world around them. Their blank stares and alien movements seemed worlds apart from the warm, expressive eyes of mammals or birds. But today, scientists are challenging this view with one of the most controversial questions in animal science. Do fish feel pain? When a fish is hooked, does it merely twitch out of reflex, or does it truly suffer? On one side, skeptics argue that fish lack the brain regions, like the neocortex, that humans use to process pain. Without this structure, they claim, fish cannot experience pain as we do. Instead, their reactions may be nothing more than automatic survival responses. But recent research tells a different story. Studies reveal that fish have nociceptors, specialized nerve cells that detect harmful stimuli. When injected with irritants, fish display long-term behavioral changes, like rubbing affected areas or avoiding certain environments, suggesting more than simple reflex. Some even reduce feeding, a hallmark of sustained discomfort. Adding to the debate, fish can learn to avoid painful situations and show signs of stress when anticipating them. These findings suggest a level of processing that resembles what we call experience. If fish do feel pain, the implications are enormous. Billions of fish are caught, farmed, and consumed each year, often without the protections given to mammals or birds. Recognizing fish as conscious beings would challenge not only science but ethics, pushing us to rethink how we interact with the most exploited vertebrates on Earth. The debate is far from settled, but one thing is clear. Beneath the waves may swim creatures with far richer inner lives than we once imagined. For centuries, insects were dismissed as tiny automatons, creatures running on hardwired programs with no room for thought. But in recent decades, science has cracked open the world of the hive, revealing something astonishing. Bees may be capable of awareness, choice, and even learning in ways once thought impossible for such small brains. Take, for example, decision-making. In controlled experiments, bees are trained to recognize shapes, colors, and even patterns. They can learn that a blue flower means sugar water, while a yellow one means nothing. More surprisingly, bees can transfer this knowledge to new situations, showing flexibility instead of rigid instinct. This adaptability hints at cognition, not just reflex. In one groundbreaking study, bees learned to associate the concept of zero with a blank panel, making them the first non-human species known to grasp this abstract idea. They also show the ability to count, distinguishing between different numbers of objects, a skill that underpins higher-order thought. Bees don't just think in numbers, they make complex choices. When faced with uncertainty, they will sometimes delay a decision, much like humans hesitate when unsure. This suggests a form of metacognition, thinking about their own thinking. Even more astonishing is their ability to communicate knowledge through the famous waggle dance, passing information about food sources across the hive. Each dance is not merely a reflex. It's a conscious transmission of experience, a bridge between individual and collective awareness. While their brains are the size of a poppy seed, bees remind us that intelligence and consciousness aren't about size. They're about complexity and adaptability. In their tiny neural circuits may lie profound lessons about the roots of awareness itself. So, when a bee buzzes past your ear, it might not just be a mindless insect at work. It could be a small but conscious traveler navigating a world of decisions, choices, and meaning. When we think of consciousness, we usually picture animals, creatures with eyes, ears, and brains. But in recent years, some scientists have asked a radical question. Could plants also have a kind of awareness? At first glance, the idea seems absurd. Plants lack neurons, brains, and nervous systems. Yet, studies suggest they may possess a different kind of intelligence, one rooted in chemistry, electrical signaling, and responsiveness to the environment. Take communication. Plants can talk to each other using chemical signals. When a caterpillar chews on a leaf, the plant releases volatile compounds into the air. Nearby plants detect these molecules and prepare their defenses, almost as if a warning was sent. Plants also react to sound. Experiments show that roots grow toward the faint vibration of running water, even when no moisture is present in the soil. Some species respond to the sound of a caterpillar chewing by strengthening their defenses before being attacked. Their problem-solving abilities are also surprising. In one famous experiment, climbing plants learned to anticipate the location of a supporting pole, moving in ways that suggested a kind of memory. Others can detect gravity, light direction, and even the shadow of competitors, adjusting their growth accordingly. Some scientists propose that plants exhibit a distributed intelligence, not centered in a brain, but spread across networks of roots and cells. Critics argue this is metaphor, not evidence of true awareness. But the debate remains open. The question of whether plants have consciousness forces us to ask, is awareness limited to creatures with brains, or is it a more fundamental property of life? If plants are in some way aware of their world, then the forest is not silent. It is alive with an invisible, intelligent conversation. Whether or not we call it consciousness, plants remind us that intelligence can take many forms, some radically different from our own. Artificial intelligence is often seen as the crown jewel of human innovation, a system that can recognize faces, translate languages, and even compose music. But when we place AI next to the natural intelligence of animals, fascinating comparisons arise. At its core, AI doesn't think the way we do. Machine learning models work by processing enormous amounts of data and finding statistical patterns. For example, an AI can identify thousands of pictures of cats until it learns to spot one. But animals, even with far smaller brains, can often generalize and adapt with far fewer examples. Take a crow. With just one encounter, it can recognize a human face and remember it for years, warning others about potential danger. Or consider a puppy. It doesn't need millions of training images to learn what a ball is. A few playful interactions are enough. This difference highlights something essential. Animals live in the real world. Their intelligence evolved to solve survival problems, finding food, avoiding predators, nurturing young. AI, meanwhile, exists in carefully defined tasks built by humans. It has no inner world, no desires, and no emotions to guide its choices. Yet, AI and animals share similarities. Both rely on trial and error. Reinforcement learning in machines mimics the way animals learn from rewards and punishments. Neural networks, the backbone of AI, were inspired by biological neurons firing in the brain. Some researchers even wonder, could studying AI help us understand consciousness? Or does the comparison only highlight how different machines are from living minds? After all, no matter how advanced, AI has never felt hunger, joy, or fear. Animals, on the other hand, experience these states directly, and those feelings may be central to consciousness itself. So while AI can mimic aspects of animal intelligence, it lacks the embodied experience of life. What if consciousness isn't a light switch that flips on or off, but instead a vast dimmer with infinite shades? This is the idea of the continuum of consciousness. At one end, there is basic awareness, the ability to sense and respond to the environment. A worm may not know it exists, but it can still react to touch, light, or chemical changes in its surroundings. Moving up the scale, fish and reptiles may have more flexible responses, with behaviors that suggest learning, memory, and even choice. Birds and mammals add even more layers: problem-solving, emotional connections, planning, and, in some cases, self-recognition. Humans sit at the extreme high end of the spectrum, with advanced self-awareness, language, and the ability to reflect on past and future. But this doesn't mean animals below us are unconscious. Instead, they may simply live at different levels of awareness. This view challenges the idea of a sharp boundary separating conscious beings from unconscious ones. Consciousness, instead, becomes a living spectrum stretching across species, each adapted to its own survival needs. Understanding this continuum is crucial. If animals exist along a sliding scale of awareness, then consciousness is not exclusive to humans, but a shared evolutionary heritage. It suggests that life is filled with minds, some simple, some complex, all experiencing the world in ways we're only beginning to imagine.
For centuries, philosophers and scientists have debated whether consciousness is rare, existing only in humans, or whether it is a fundamental property of the universe itself. Enter panpsychism, a bold and provocative idea that consciousness isn't something that magically appears when brains become complex enough, but rather that it is woven into the very fabric of reality. According to this view, all matter has some form of experience, however faint. An electron, a rock, or a tree would not think or feel as we do, but they might contain the tiniest spark of awareness. Combine countless sparks in the complexity of a brain, and you get rich, self-reflective minds like ours. Strip away complexity, and you still have a shimmer of experience at the foundation of nature. Panpsychism challenges our human-centered assumptions by erasing the idea of a strict divide between conscious and unconscious. Instead, it suggests that awareness is not an accident of evolution, but a basic ingredient of existence, like space, time, or energy. Critics argue this idea is untestable, that it blurs science with mysticism. But advocates see it as a way to solve the hard problem of consciousness. Why and how subjective experience arises from matter. If consciousness is everywhere, the mystery isn't how it begins, but how it becomes structured into minds. For animals, panpsychism reframes the debate. Rather than asking, are they conscious like us? It suggests the real question might be, to what degree is consciousness expressed in their lives? From this perspective, humans and animals aren't outliers in a mindless universe. Instead, we are participants in a cosmos that may be alive with awareness at every scale. If animals are conscious, if they truly have inner lives, then our relationship with them cannot remain the same. Consciousness changes everything. It means that behind those eyes is not just instinct or reflex, but experience, moments of joy, fear, pain, and even curiosity. For centuries, humans have drawn a dividing line. We considered ourselves special, separate, the only beings truly aware. But modern science and philosophy are erasing that line. The evidence shows that many animals possess forms of awareness, and perhaps even self-recognition. This recognition forces us to ask difficult questions about how we treat them. Do we have a right to use conscious beings as mere tools for food, entertainment, or labor? Is it ethical to keep highly aware animals in captivity, or to subject them to suffering in factory farms, labs, or circuses? If an elephant mourns, if a dolphin reflects, if a crow plans for tomorrow, then their lives are not just biological, they are meaningful. Acknowledging animal consciousness doesn't mean all animals experience the world exactly as we do, but it does mean their subjective experiences matter. And if they matter, then ignoring them becomes a moral blind spot. History shows that ethical circles expand, from families to nations to races, and now perhaps beyond our species. Recognizing animal minds may be the next great step in human morality, redefining compassion, responsibility, and our role as stewards of Earth's life. In short, consciousness is not only a scientific puzzle, it is an ethical revolution.
If animals are conscious, then the industrial systems we've built around them raise one of the greatest ethical dilemmas of our age. Factory farming houses billions of cows, pigs, chickens, and fish in conditions designed for efficiency, not well-being. These animals are often confined in cages so small they cannot turn, separated from families, and subjected to practices that cause stress, fear, and pain. For decades, society justified this by assuming animals were mindless, driven only by instinct. But what if that assumption is wrong? If a pig can solve puzzles, if a chicken can recognize dozens of individuals, if a cow can form deep social bonds, then these beings are not machines. They are lives with experiences. Science increasingly supports the idea that these farmed animals are sentient, capable of suffering, and perhaps even possessing elements of self-awareness. This forces us to confront a difficult truth. The cheaper our meat, eggs, and dairy, the greater the hidden cost and suffering. Recognizing animal consciousness doesn't dictate a single answer. Some advocate for plant-based diets, others for improved welfare standards, and others still for lab-grown meat as a cruelty-free solution. What matters is that awareness transforms the moral landscape. It challenges us to align our food systems with compassion and to see factory farming not just as an economic system, but as a profound ethical choice. If animals are conscious, then every meal carries a moral weight. The question becomes, what kind of world do we want to build? One of indifference or one of empathy? Conservation is often measured in numbers, population counts, survival rates, or the size of remaining habitats. But if animals are conscious beings, capable of awareness, memory, and even cultural traditions, then conservation takes on a deeper meaning. Protecting an elephant herd is not just saving bodies in space. It is preserving a community with shared memories, bonds, and even grief. Safeguarding a pod of whales is not simply conserving a species, but ensuring the survival of entire cultures passed down through song. This perspective transforms conservation from an act of charity to an act of respect. If we acknowledge that animals live not just biologically, but experientially, then every extinction represents not only the loss of genetic material, but the disappearance of a world of awareness. Scientists now argue that conservation must expand beyond species survival to include the protection of animal minds. This means preserving social groups, migratory traditions, and environments that allow rich mental lives to flourish. An elephant matriarch's wisdom, a dolphin's cultural song, a crow's clever problem-solving. These are all parts of consciousness worth defending. Recognizing animals as conscious forces us to ask, when we destroy a forest, a coral reef, or a migration route, what kinds of minds are we erasing from existence? Conservation then becomes not just about saving life, but about protecting the vast diversity of awareness that makes our planet extraordinary. For centuries, questions about animal consciousness were limited to observation and interpretation. But today, science has a new window into the mind: brain imaging. Using tools like fMRI, EEG, and PET scans, researchers can now watch animal brains in action, capturing patterns of activity once hidden. Studies on primates show that areas of their brains light up in ways strikingly similar to ours when making decisions, feeling emotions, or recognizing social cues. Dogs and scanners respond not only to their owner's scent, but also to the sound of their voice, activating reward and bonding centers much like in the human brain. Even in birds, advanced imaging reveals complex neural circuits that rival mammalian systems, reshaping how we think about intelligence outside of primates. What's most fascinating is how these scans reveal not just thinking, but feeling. When a rat shows signs of regret, or when an elephant recalls a watering hole, imaging suggests that they're not simply reacting, they're experiencing. Consciousness, once invisible, is now leaving traces on a screen. While these technologies cannot fully capture what it feels like to be a dolphin, a crow, or a bat, they bring us closer than ever before. They hint that awareness is not a human monopoly, but a shared biological phenomenon that takes different shapes across species. The more we scan, the more we see. Behind every animal, I may be a mind at work. If consciousness exists in animals, where exactly does it live in the brain? Scientists call this search the hunt for the neural correlates of consciousness, the specific networks and patterns that give rise to awareness. In humans, brain regions like the prefrontal cortex and parietal lobe are central to conscious thought. But when we look across the animal kingdom, we find surprises. Birds, for example, don't even have a neocortex, yet their brains support astonishing feats of intelligence, memory, and even self-recognition. Their pallium, a very different structure, performs many of the same functions. Octopuses, with completely alien brains, still show problem-solving, play, and individuality. The lesson is profound. Consciousness does not require a human brain. Instead, it may arise from any system with enough complexity and connectivity. Whether it's neurons firing in a dolphin's cortex, the distributed networks of a crow's brain, or the flexible nervous system of an octopus, the patterns, not the structures, seem to matter most. Research shows that when animals make decisions, experience emotions, or reflect on information, similar neural signatures appear. Synchronized firing, integration of sensory data, and communication between distant brain regions. These are the echoes of awareness. The hunt for neural correlates reminds us that consciousness may not be a single switch flipped on or off, but a spectrum, one that stretches across species in ways we are only beginning to map. For centuries, humans have wondered what animals are truly thinking. Now, artificial intelligence may finally give us the tools to find out. AI can analyze vast amounts of data, far beyond what the human brain can process. By studying the calls of whales, the gestures of apes, or even the buzzing patterns of bees, AI systems are starting to detect patterns and structures hidden in animal communication. Projects using machine learning have already shown promise. For example, researchers trained AI to analyze thousands of hours of sperm whale clicks, finding repeated sequences that look strikingly like a structured language. Other teams have used AI to interpret prairie dog alarm calls, revealing that they can describe not just predators, but even details like shape, size, and color. The power of AI is not limited to sound. It can also decode body language, patterns of movement, and even brainwave signals. Neural decoding experiments with rats and monkeys already allow AI to predict choices before the animals act. These breakthroughs suggest that, with time, AI could become our translator for animal minds. But with this power comes responsibility. If AI reveals that animals experience richer inner lives than we imagined, it raises deep ethical questions. Will humanity listen? Will we treat other beings differently if their thoughts become clearer to us? For the first time in history, we stand on the edge of not just imagining, but actually understanding the consciousness of other species. The dream of talking to animals, once myth and fantasy, may one day be a scientific reality. In July 2012, inside the halls of the University of Cambridge, something historic happened. A group of the world's leading neuroscientists, cognitive psychologists, and animal behavior experts came together to make a bold statement: animals are conscious. This statement became known as the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. It declared that many non-human animals, including all mammals, birds, and even some invertebrates like octopuses, possess the neurological substrates necessary to generate consciousness. In simpler terms, these creatures are not just reacting to the world, they are experiencing it. For centuries, philosophers and scientists argued over whether animals were mindless machines or true sentient beings. The Declaration broke that divide. It confirmed what pet owners, naturalists, and indigenous traditions had always believed: animals feel, perceive, and are aware. The importance of this declaration cannot be overstated. It was not a casual opinion, but a scientific consensus signed by experts like Christoph Koch, David Edelman, and Philip Lowe, and endorsed by world-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking, who attended the announcement. Their message was clear: humans are not alone in possessing consciousness. This changed the conversation. Suddenly, questions about farming, research, conservation, and animal rights had new moral weight. If animals are conscious, then they're not just resources or biological machines. They are fellow beings with inner worlds. The Cambridge Declaration did not solve the mysteries of the mind, but it drew a line in history, one where humanity officially recognized that consciousness is not uniquely human. It belongs to the great tapestry of life on Earth. Even with decades of research and monumental breakthroughs like the Cambridge Declaration, the truth is this: consciousness remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in science. We can measure brain waves, decode neural signals, and observe behavior, but the essence of awareness, the inner spark of being, is something science has yet to fully explain. We know that animals feel, perceive, and respond in ways that cannot be dismissed as mere reflexes. From the grief of elephants to the play of dolphins, from the self-recognition of magpies to the empathy of dogs, the evidence is overwhelming that their minds are not empty vessels. Yet how that subjective experience arises remains elusive. Philosophers call this the hard problem of consciousness. Why does a collection of neurons give rise to the feeling of being alive? Why do some experiences feel rich and meaningful, while others pass unnoticed? And if we struggle to answer this question for ourselves, how can we ever be certain what it feels like to be a crow, an octopus, or even a dog curled at our feet? The mystery deepens when we consider the vast diversity of life. Does a bat, navigating through darkness with echolocation, experience reality in a way utterly foreign to us? Does a fish schooling in the ocean feel a group awareness? Does an octopus, with neurons spread across its arms, live with multiple centers of consciousness? For every answer, new questions appear. Consciousness might not be a single thing, but a spectrum, a continuum stretching across the animal kingdom in ways we have only begun to glimpse. And so, the mystery remains, tantalizing, humbling, and deeply beautiful. It reminds us that life is far richer than our human-centered perspective can capture. The question is no longer whether animals are conscious, but how vast and varied the experience of consciousness across Earth truly is. If animals are conscious, if they can feel, reflect, and experience the world in ways both familiar and alien to us, then Earth is not just a planet of life, but a planet of minds. Minds that sing beneath the oceans, that take flight on beating wings, that grieve in forests, and that curl up beside us in quiet empathy. This realization changes everything. It challenges us to rethink our place in nature, not as rulers over unconscious creatures, but as participants in a shared web of awareness. Every living being carries its own perspective, its own private window into existence. Some may be simple, others unimaginably rich, but each is a piece of the great tapestry of consciousness. And yet, the mystery is far from solved. Science has given us glimpses, self-recognition in mirrors, empathy in dogs, culture in whales, and intelligence in octopuses. Philosophy has given us frameworks, from panpsychism to the continuum of awareness. But the ultimate question, what it feels like to be another being, remains just out of reach. Perhaps that is the gift of this journey. Not answers, but humility. To know that we are surrounded by inner lives we may never fully grasp is to be reminded of wonder, respect, and responsibility. As we move forward, we face a choice. Do we treat animals as mere resources, or do we recognize them as fellow travelers in the mystery of consciousness? The way we answer will define the future of our relationship with life on Earth. If this exploration has opened your mind to the hidden worlds around us, don't let it end here. Like, subscribe, and join us as we continue uncovering the deepest truths of nature, one story at a time. Because the more we learn, the clearer it becomes. We are not alone in awareness. We are part of a planet alive, not just with bodies, but with minds,